Hey, it's Coach T. This is week 12 of my 52-week development log into me learning C Sharp. These videos are primarily for me to reflect on in July 2025 when I hopefully turn around and look at all the progress that I've made, and I have definitely been making progress. Um, so, one thing I should say to future me here is that not all weeks are made equal. So this week, we're still recovering from COVID. Little baby now has COVID, so she's kind of a sick, snotty mess. Haven't had a lot of time, and we had a lot of job responsibilities with after work obligations. So we didn't have a lot of time to work, but it doesn't mean that we slowed down because I'm a big fan of the 1% every day rule. So at the bare minimum, I should be doing 1% of what it is that I'm trying to accomplish every day. That might be 1% of a programming language, which is insane if you really think about it. But in this case, it was just getting myself 1% closer to understanding object-oriented programming designs. So every day, my goal was to attack a different design pattern or to continue to work on one design pattern until I started to really grasp it. And that was okay. We were moving along. We got records pretty easily. There was no issue with that using the R.B. Whitaker chapter. I actually implemented them into my school application upstairs on a different terminal that I've been working on. And then we turned the page and we ended up at interfaces, and all progress ground to a complete halt. So I spent Tuesday evening, Wednesday evening, well, the little bit of time I had on Tuesday, these are not equal amounts of study time, but Tuesday, Wednesday lunch, Wednesday evening, Thursday lunch, Thursday evening, and then Friday afternoon working on understanding the interface like object. I don't exactly know what to call it because it's not an object, it's a contract, is my understanding. And you can see it reflected here in the code that I'm using. So I've got a new iUser interface. I don't know if it's because it was called interface or in my head I'm thinking a graphic user interface. I don't know if it's because I don't exactly know how to describe what it is, but this concept was probably the hardest thing I've really had to grapple with since maybe the first time I encountered the for loop. Maybe, I mean, outside of some mathematical operations, because math is not my immediate strong suit, some of the mathematical practice applications have been challenging, like doing factorial stuff, but that's a matter of grasping that algorithm. But in terms of grasping the concept, I don't remember hitting a wall like this with interfaces the way that I did with like for loops in Python, maybe, where I was like, what is going on? And that's actually why I made that initial video in the Python Quick Dive series, is because I had such a hard time with for loops. And it wasn't until I started to think of it as a deck of cards that it clicked for me. And I'm still not really grasping an analogy for an interface. I know everywhere I've read has called it a contract, but the descriptions don't click for me the way that other things have. So like classes, blueprints, got it. An instance, that's the actual house built from the blueprint, got it. String variable being a reference type that goes to the heap. A heap is temporary memory that's allocated on demand. Got it. Like those are things that I didn't struggle with them the same way that I struggle with interfaces. A while loop is a condition that continues until something changes. Okay, well, I'm a teacher, so I know all about that. We keep working until you get it. While you can't spell with silent E, I'm going to continue to attack this problem in a slightly different way, right? So I have an analogy for a lot of things, but an interface, the closest that I've gotten is something like a USB key. And maybe also I didn't encounter this in Python. Everything else has largely had an analog in Python, but this is the first time that in C# I've really been like, what? So if you're a C# developer or you're a .NET developer and for some reason you're watching my video diaries, maybe you can comment down below and share with me your learning process or give me some words of wisdom here. I can implement them now. I can write them. I can write them with no issue. And I can iterate using them. I just don't see the use if I have an abstract class. And my only experience with like multiple inheritance is in Pygame, I think. If I got to think back a couple months. So largely when I've done inheritance with classes, it's been one, a class character inherits class player inherits from class character, class monster inherits from class character, etc. Or, weapon inherits from class item. And I know you can do like super init in Pygame, which I think gives you multiple inheritance. It's been a hot minute, but I'm just not clicking with why I would use this. And so my primary use case for learning C# is twofold. The immediate one is, well, it may be threefold. The immediate one is I want to develop educational apps for my colleagues. So things like a means of collecting all the kids that you have in your class and then being able to leave comments for yourself, but that another teacher could read, because we swap kids a lot. That's part of the model that I've helped work into my practice in schools, is that the teacher that your kid has for certain types of classes probably shouldn't be the teacher all year when you're doing a skills-based approach. So that kind of feels like it should be an interface. I think if I have class teacher, I might have interface like RTI teacher, so that then I can swap any other RTI teacher in for that teacher where it's an applicable case. My other use case is I'd eventually like to develop a game. Maybe I like to 3D model. I like to do art. I like certain types of video games a lot. It's not really my main focus though. It's like maybe once I get better at everything else, it would be fun to experiment with. I did have fun with Pygame. But it's not my main use case here is for these educational apps. That's why every time I do a video log, I'm showing off the progress that I'm making towards that. And then my third use case is I eventually I want to be able to develop a web app for myself, but as a parent and teacher reference for science of reading stuff. So that might be like Blazor or something like that, Maui maybe. So those are my three use cases, and I'm just not grokking where I would use an interface for that. A lot of the examples have been around products and SKUs, or, like, oh, you have a different fuel source for your class car, class truck, class train, and so you have a fuel interface where it doesn't care where the fuel's coming from, but that's not really a concrete example. It's a nice metaphor, but I think I need to see them. I don't know. I know part of this is context is my enemy because I don't have enough context. I can only write the apps that I can write. I don't have a team or junior development position where I'm looking at somebody else's code and then beginning to understand why they made these decisions. So every object that I encounter, I have to be able to write it out and see how it plays myself. So I did do that. So in this case, I've got public interface iUser. And so any user in this application that I would set up, kind of like a database, would have a user ID, first name, last name, email, password, username. It doesn't care how we get them. It just cares that they're there, and then changing the username. So we need to be able to do this for any user. And then also we have an enum somewhere in the file that shows off the access level and the account type. And then, let's see. So I've got two classes that implement the iUser interface right here. So they have all these things, but some of them are computed properties and some of them are default preset properties. And then I do have private set. So that was something I learned a little belatedly, is that I can have a get in my interface, but I can have a set in the actual implementation. I don't know why I just overread that sentence several times. And didn't get it. And then I've got some basic, these are just throw exceptions because the method's not there, but here it is. Really appreciating how Visual Studio just lets me build an interface real fast and build it right into the class. So, because I can just right click and quick, generate constructor. So anyway, so yeah, these both implement type user, or the iUser interface, and then if I run this thing, still stuffy. This is my practice from Thursday night. Yeah, so it generates all of the users that are currently plugged in, right? So Ellie and Kay, they're students, and then I am a teacher. Password is just set to a default 001 for now. Gives me the first name, and these are coming from this iteration loop here, for each iUser. So the user type is being called, and it doesn't care what class it is. So I understand the implementation. I just don't get the value in the use. And when I see, it enables polymorphism, I don't understand why, when I still have to plug in those classes. So, I mean, if you know, I'd love to know more. I've watched Tim Corey's video on it, which really helped me understand the implementation and some of the uses. I've watched Christina's video. I've read the R.B. Whitaker chapter like 3 times. So I get what it is. I get the implementation. I don't understand the value in my use case. So that's frustrating. But at least I can write them, and I've been trying to think, as I've done some other practice stuff, I've been trying to think where could I use them. So yesterday I finished the 4th Learn.Microsoft micro course, number 4. I completely finished it. And as I was doing, it's all procedural programming, so it's top-down stuff, and that's a little frustrating at this point because I've spent 2 months in the object-oriented paradigm now, using classes, using methods, and I was like, I could maybe see having a pet interface that specifies the minimums here, and then I could cycle through pets or cycle through dogs or something like that, which would have been simpler than the way that they made me do it, which still wasn't that complicated. So I'm trying to find uses as I work on other problems that are pitched to me. I just don't get when I'd use this in the wild. So yeah, that's my honest weekly update. Structs and records more than structs. Got it like that. I still need to do some time on structs. But I get what it is. It's a simple behavior data reference, or no, non-reference value storing class. Got it. So simple, very little class instance. Record, same thing, but it's a reference type as far as I understand. And those, I implemented those right away. So in the grown-up version of this app, which allows teachers to input dibbles and star and other types of data, and then retrieve it and to a degree now kind of analyze it. Each assessment is stored as a type of record, and then it gets added to a list of records of that type of record. So if I have like a record for Dibble's ORF, that's its own class type, and then you instance it every time you want to input a new one to a list, and it stores like 2 fields. It's like the total number of correct, the total errors, and then you can do any kind of computation on that to find accuracy or growth between 2 or whatever. So that was easy, and I feel like maybe because I've spent so much time looking at literal assessment records, I was like, oh, got it, and I moved on with my life. But that might even better be a struct. I don't know. I guess I have to really look at the 2. So it was a theory-heavy week for me, and this video is also getting pretty long. So I'm not sure what I'm working on next week. I've got interfaces down to the point where I've practiced it. I'm not concerned about the syntax. I'm not concerned about the implementation, but I guess this coming week 13, I'm going to be working on structs and records, and I'm going to push forward in the masterclass Udemy course for sure, because she's going through different types of polymorphic strategies that you can use when building classes, and I'm finding that really interesting. I might leave Whitaker alone for a little bit, though, because I've kind of got ahead of where Christina is in the masterclass Udemy course. So I might leave the player's handbook alone for a hot minute and focus on Udemy and maybe Learn.Microsoft, because the text-based courses I can parse through pretty quickly. And honestly, it's very easy at this point. So it's kind of just a feather in my cap to finish it. So that's it. We're at 15 minutes. This is a long one. I will be back next Saturday, I think, with hopefully some good news about records and structs, and maybe more of an app demo of what it was that I've been working on building with the data record application. So yeah, that's it. Happy C#, Learn to Code 2024, and you're not as dumb as you feel. Just keep looking for new teachers if what you're trying to learn doesn't make sense. Someone will be able to break it down for you. So 1% every day. That's the goal. See you next week.